Fantastic, fantastic. Well, welcome, everybody. We have Terrence Latimer here, owner operator of Black Cactus Co-working, and I'm super excited to be here and joined by my brother, my homie, my friend, Mr. Julian Newman, who is an incredible human being and who's here to talk to us a little bit about his subject matter expertise, which comes in the form of, in my opinion, what it means to be a leader and leverage culture as a strategy. Right? Which, again, I'm gonna allow Julian to introduce himself, but what I can say that I love about him is the example that he provides as a man and an individual first. It's infectious, right? And one thing that I've learned about collaboration and working with others is that the way that people carry themselves is an opportunity to get an understanding of what's going on internally, all the hard work being done in order to set up a culture of one in so many different ways, and not being advice with the members of your tribe that you really work with. So, again, today's conversation is on coping as a strategy, how inclusive leadership drives long-term business growth. And on that note, Mr. Julian, Mr. Newman, please feel free to introduce yourself and let the audience know a little bit about you.
Well, thank you very much, man. I really excited to be able to have this conversation with you. We've had a lot of discussions over the course of time, man, and so it's nice to be able to do this officially in this way. For everybody out there checking this out, I'm a father. That's a really important part of my life. We were just talking before we started recording. Today it was field day for my youngest daughter, and so it was like this Olympic style. All the school area schools were competing, and my daughter's school actually won, and so I was hyped. Running all over the place. She did a 35-meter dash.
Okay.
And so I didn't know, I didn't know how she was going to do. So, but I recorded a little bit. And what I should have done is I should have been at the finish line. I was at the starting line.
Mm.
And so my girl, she handled her business. So I was running down there. I was running through the crowd and everything, grabbing her like, oh, you look crazy. And I told her, I said, listen, there's a quote in Rocky. I said, remember when we watched Rocky and he said, all your love, all your power, everything you got. I said, that's what I need you to do. So I ran into her. I said, you put all your love into it. You put your love into it. So it was crazy. I was acting crazy. But that's an important part of my life. And when we talk about culture, I think that culture is our business. It is our community. It is our ability to network, creatively and thoughtfully across industry. You use the word collaboration, but I think also one of the areas where we learn how to do it, or even learn what shouldn't be done, is in the context of family.
Mm.
And so, one of the things that's important to me is, trying my best to navigate a positive culture in the family context,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of the things that I've been able to bring into, to business, my book, have been shaped by my experiences as a father and as a parent, but also as a boy growing up being parented and being able to observe, the dynamic of my grandparents and my cousins and my uncles and my aunts and all those different things. That's a part of, what I believe for me, I bring to the world the return on the investment of so many others, that preceded me in the family context. And, in addition to, what would happen in, outside of that in a mentoring context. So, I had an amazing day today. I'm glad that my daughter's, school won. I was dapping up all the, they did a tug of war and they won, right? So there's all these boys, because I'm at the school, doing stuff, dressing up for Halloween and doing different things. So there was a group of fifth grade boys they know me. So
Right.
I started saying what's up to them by name. They're like, "Damn me up." So I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." Go through the line. It was crazy. But again, I do that one. It's fun for me, but I also recognize that for some of those boys, one, they have not seen a positive, male figure in their life.
Mm.
So I'm not saying that's everybody's experience, but I know it's at least some experience. And so it's like, listen, in that little moment, they have the opportunity to make a positive connection. Or I have the opportunity to make a positive connection with someone, and they may say, you know what, man, when I was in the fifth grade, there was one of the fathers of one of my classmates that he treated me this way. And so I think that that's an important part of my life because, hey, man, we can make, all the money in the world and we want to do well and scale our businesses. But what contribution are we making in our community and society
Mm.
to make it a better, more beautiful place? That's a part of, I believe, my responsibility. And I believe it's a part of our responsibility as stakeholders and culture creators.
Yeah, no doubt, brother. And I mean, you said so many, things that, I fully align with. I mean, first and foremost, and if we're even thinking about it from like an economic perspective, a lot of businesses in general, but particularly throughout history, started out as family owned and run businesses, right? And in so many different ways, and I've written about this before in some of my blogs, why and how I run my relationship as a CEO in so many different ways in terms of, creating a culture of accountability and understanding that everybody's got a role. And, so much of the job of the CEO is to, personify the values of the organization, to, set a direction and then empower teammates to get to where it is that you want to go, you know. And so, I'm fully in alignment with that. And as a kid, that's part of like we had jobs when we were kids growing up in the family, cooking dinner a couple days a week. We had to cook dinner Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we had to clean the house on Saturdays and maintain our room, right? And that then helped us to get an understanding of, getting an allowance, for example, and like earning your keep in so many different ways. Um, and I really appreciate, some of the other examples that you have provided in that, because then there's that extension from the family pod into the community pod and how you then show up as a member of your community to, develop that respect, that reputation rooted in the way, like the culture that your family sort of represents, you know what I mean, and plays a part in, and then allowing others in so many different ways to feel that and to be a member of your tribe, kinfolk in so many different ways. And I think both of those things then combine to allow you to have the reputation within the business community that you are a leader and or someone that should be followed or whose voice is deserving of being heard and felt, man. And that's, I mean, and sometimes we call that corporate and social responsibility, right? There's like a term for that in the corporate world, but you are living and breathing and personifying that. And that maybe is going to be one of my first questions for you. Maybe you can just, you've sort of alluded it to it already, but what were some of the early life experiences that helped you shape your leadership philosophy, Julian?
Man, I think my first leader would be my father. And there are times where in my present day, I can think of, man, this is how my father would say this.
Mm.
This is how my father would respond to this. And so my father is he's a wonderful man. He was my football coach.
Yep.
So he coached my team. And one of the things I can remember that he said to me was the power of giving your best and doing your best. And so what happened was I grew up in Sacramento. So I was playing for the Sacramento Steelers, man.
Ah,
And I was on, I don't know if I was Pee Wees, Junior Peas, whatever. but my father was coaching the team up.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
he was coaching the team ahead of me, and then I was below. And so I was fine with that because everybody was my age and everything else. Well, the team he was coaching didn't have enough players. So they took me off the team I was on and brought me up with
Oh wow.
older boys.
Wow.
So I didn't want to be on that team, man. You know, these kids were bigger, they were older. You know, some of them looked like they had beards or mustaches already. You know what I mean? And so I didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And so my dad was like, "Listen, I believe you can play, you know, with these boys." And so I played that first season just scared, you know, urgent, like, yo, I got to do my best. I got to, you know, I don't know if I can be here. And um, so then the next year I played pretty well that first year. Well, the next year, you know, I was expecting to be good. And I remember whenever we
Mm-hmm.
ran laps that first year, I was always first. I was always one of the first kids. The
Mm-hmm.
second year, I was like, you know, I'm Hollywood. You know, hey, yo, you know, even as a young boy, I was like feeling myself.
Right.
So what happened was I wasn't running. I was at the back. And so my dad, after practice, was like, listen, you know, you and I need to have a conversation.
Mm.
And he said, last year you always gave your best. You were first. This year you think you're good now, and now you're last. You're the kids that
Mm.
don't give their best. He said,
Mm.
that's not what we do here.
Mm.
And so that energy is something that I bring into my parenting, I bring into my leadership, I bring into my life.
Mm.
And so, you know, my father was my example of you bring your best, you do your best, and I don't suffer fools gladly. Like
Mm.
to this very day, it's like if you're gonna come to my father with some foolishness, you probably don't want to do that.
Right.
And so he was my first example in a family context, and I am a father who descended from great fathers.
Mm.
And so I think about my dad, I think about my father's father, and I think
Mm.
about the stories that my father's father told me about his father.
Mm.
And so I feel like part of my ability or my opportunity, I should say, to be able to do things in the community, to be able to do things in the context of business and all of that stemmed from way back in the day, my father saying, listen, this is how we do this.
Mm.
You know, before you go out, you talk about chores. Hey, listen, you're gonna cut this lawn,
That part.
and on Saturday, this is what we do. You know what
That
I
part.
mean? And so we don't. I don't play. Don't talk to me about doing X, Y, and Z until the stuff that you know that you're supposed to be doing is done. Then we can have a conversation about the stuff that you want to do, but you're gonna do the stuff that you have to do.
That part.
And and so it's envy, man, because I was raised in that.
Yeah, man. Well, great answer, man. And I appreciate hearing about the legacy that you inherited, and then, what I would love to maybe, address now is how you have transformed that. And I know you better than the audience does, hopefully, and hopefully this is a reminder to everyone to do a little bit of research. But, what I can tell you is that Julian is not, only a father. He's not only a published author, he's not only the head of a organization, he's not only an award winner. I mean, this brother is diverse. I consider you to be a renaissance man, like me. You feel me? Like, I know you did your play. He performed in A Raisin in the Sun. Like, this dude is multifaceted, multi-talented. But my question for you, and this may be an opportunity just to give the audience a little bit more perspective
Mm-hmm.
on, tell us about Culture Creative and the
Mm-hmm.
organization that you've built and what it is that you do and how that aligns
Mm-hmm.
maybe with the
Mm-hmm.
legacy that you've inherited.
So um, I told you I'm from California. You know this. So I moved to the Midwest.
Right.
So I moved to the Midwest, and my daughters were very, very young, and they were just starting school. And their experience in school was they were dealing with racism at a level that I didn't know that we were doing that to little kids.
Mm.
So my experience growing up with racism, my father grew up, was from Alabama. My mama his family is from Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
So my father was always telling me about experiences he had as a boy dealing with, in the segregated South. We watch the movies. We got to go to the balcony. We got to do this. We got to do that, whatever. So that was his experience. And so for me, I grew up with that awareness, but I did not grow up with that experience in that same way.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So I didn't grow up with the awareness that, hey, listen, I can't do this. I have to do this in order to stay safe. That wasn't my reality. So for me, racism was something I dealt with, as all, Black people, non-white folks, in America do on some level, but I did not experience it in my awareness on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my daughters were experiencing things on a daily basis that blew me away.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, what can I do to help my daughters? What can I do to advocate for them? So in my desire or my attempt to advocate for them, I kind of fell into the work of diversity, inclusion, leadership development, all that. So my goal was, how do I help the school district grow? How do I do that?
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing those type of things. And so then I started working with different organizations that were doing this work. And I saw a measure of success. But what I noticed was an absence. And the absence with most of the organization that were doing this work is that they could diagnose the sickness, the illness, and they could tell us as people where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where it comes from. This is how it's affecting the patient, but we don't have a prognosis on how to make the patient better.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about the history of things. We can talk about how the history impacts the present, but we're not talking about what happens next.
Mm-hmm.
So I started Culture Creative because I felt like we have to do this work with hope connected to it. Because hope is the element that gives us the ability to press through the challenges that change requires. So if I'm trying to, get my summer body, you know what I'm saying? Like my beach body together. Okay. So why am I doing Zumba? Why am I doing all these classes? Why am I in spin? The reason why I'm making the hard investment in the present is because I have a hope in a different future. And so what happens is we often do the work of leadership development, the work of change without hope. We don't have a vision for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, everybody loves it. Most people haven't read it or listened to it in its entirety, which I think if you haven't, you need to. But there's something that Dr. King does around the course of the speech that culminates in the end where he says, free at last, free at last. He talks about what was. He talks about, here's the history of America, and this is what happened here, and this is what happened with Lincoln. And now then he starts to talk about what is happening in the present. Okay. There's been a promissory note that has come back, insufficient funds. So he talks about the history, then he talks about the present, but then he talks about the future. The future is the dream. But before he talks about the dream, he sets it up by going history, then talk about how the history in the present, and then we goes into the future. So I wanted to have an organization that did exactly that. So Culture Creative came out of love for my daughters, and it came out of a belief in hope. And our belief is that we want to create atmospheres. We want to help organizations create atmospheres and environments where every person can achieve the highest level of their human potential. So as we talk about how do we scale, how do we increase our revenue, how are we more effective? Well, one of the big components of that is everybody is now operating at their apex, and there's no barriers to that. And so if I can remove the barriers from people being at their best, then our organization could be extraordinary. And so all of it came out of the genesis of it. The origin story of Culture Creative is a daddy and his daughters that were having issues at school And I said, I'm not going to just talk about the problem. I'm going to see what can I do to invest in solving the problem that's affecting all of us.
Man, I mean, so many dimes there, bro. And I'd like to anchor that with there are several McKinsey reports that describe the importance of diversity on executive teams and how that leads to greater levels of profitability. And it said there's a 2015 report that found that the top quarter companies had a 15% greater likelihood of financial outperformance versus their bottom quartile peers. And that figure hit 39% in 2023, I believe. Now, what I'm mindful of is that how that personal, um, access point for you, that beginning point for you was a direct reflection of some of the core values that I believe that you described in the form of hope, love, and I think belief is another one, and I think those are, I mean, it's super inspired by the I Have a Dream speech. I sort of talk about, I call them my three P's of purpose driven entrepreneurship, right? And the first P is understanding your past and understanding the things that you don't like about your past or that were impactful to you, so that you can then assess like your present skill sets, your present circumstances. And then ultimately, it's about making a prediction on what the future could look like, that third P, right? Based off of your ability
Mm-hmm.
to reconcile your past and your present. However, I have recognized that leaders, in my opinion, don't have the flexibility or the ability to live in one of those timelines. You know what I mean? You live in the past and you're stuck in the past. And you hear that all the time in the corporate world, back in my day and back in my day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, we're not living back in your day anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Not to dismiss your experience, but we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about the now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're totally in the present and living like there's no tomorrow, you
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm saying? That's also not a
Mm-hmm.
proper use of your resources and or your attentions, right? But you also can't be living too far ahead in the future where it's, oh, one day this is
Mm-hmm.
going to happen or it's going to be better. You have to sort of like live amongst the three timelines in so many different ways in order to actually make something tangible and to bring people along with you on this journey of like making this like these abstract concepts more concrete based off of this shared vision in so many different ways. And that's really what it takes. And so, yeah, man, I'm heavily inspired and I love the overlap. I think that then leads to, my next question for you, which is, in your view, what's the difference between being a leader and a culture builder?
Well, I think what's the difference? I would say that as a leader, you should be a culture builder in the truest sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would say the best leaders are culture builders.
Okay.
Now, what I would say is there are leaders that don't build culture that let's say in the context of team.
Okay.
Okay, so I talked about being on a football team. A lot of us play sports or do different things, work, in a play or do whatever. Well, there's some people that are talented and they help lead the production,
Mm,
but they're
mm,
not trying to help you with your lines. They're not trying to, hey, listen, let's work together, let's do that type of thing. But they're leading in relation to I'm going to be excellent in my lane, and that's going to elevate the production through my personal investment. That's leadership.
mm.
Okay, so I'm a salesperson. I handle compliance issues. Uh, I'm in my lane. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. Culture builders, I would say, don't just do their thing, they help other people do their thing.
Agreed.
And so leadership at the highest level is I help unleash your inner hero.
Woo.
I help you catalyze the superpower that's within you. And so that to me is what great leadership does. It's a person or a group of people that when you connect with them, you feel like you can. Like, man,
Oh,
you know what? I can do it because, I met with my supervisor, and man, I came out of there feeling like I could take on the world. Why? Because what they're doing is they're not just leading in their lane, they're lifting me up.
Uh,
And so I think that the best leaders lift up, and that lifting is where culture is created.
Now talk to me a little bit about that, man. And I've played on a couple teams, and that's I consider my leadership style to be the ambassador, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that is directly related to writing where people are always dumping their information. They're telling me, complaining, sharing their wins with me, what they're sad about, and I then reflect and I allow that to, develop empathy and trust, and then people want to follow me along the path. Now, to your whole point about individual contributors, where I've had to deal with some divas before, where they're like, "Yo, I'm doing this and I'm doing this," and nobody is like, they're not at my level. You know what I'm saying? And those diva behaviors, like, it's hard to not want to like give in and give them everything that they want, because to your whole point, they're like, they're individual contributors, and they're maybe patting the stats a little bit, you know what I'm saying? But
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, like, what I've recognized, and I actually had a conversation with this with a friend today, is that sometimes you have to recognize the numbers that aren't being counted and how they are making people uncomfortable, or people want to quit, or
Mm-hmm.
showing up late because they don't want to deal with this person, or
Mm-hmm.
and so I guess my question for you is, what is that balance of reaching the diva and helping them to
Mm-hmm.
understand their ability to contribute and provide to the team, not just from a numbers perspective, but lift them up so that they can recognize other ways to lead or other ways to be a culture carrier for the org?
I think so. First, I would say before I engage with the diva, the talented superstar that isn't
Yes.
necessarily concerned about everybody else that's on the team or in the choir, in the production, et cetera, or the sales department or what have you, is I have to set the culture of my organization by determining what is my vision and mission.
Yes.
So now what is the why behind our organization? So our organization or our production, our team, this is what we do. Okay, so this is what we do, and this is who we are.
Mm,
So now that I've established, now that we've established that overarching vision,
yep.
our overarching mission, this is what we're going to do, why we're going to do it, this is how we're going to do it. So now, superstar diva person, if they're not in alignment with the vision mission, now I'm holding them accountable to what they agreed to when they got on the team, when they're
That
on the
part.
production.
That part.
So I deal with the situation before the situation comes.
Mm,
This is what we agreed to. And so now you're not in alignment with the agreement. So
mm,
we got to talk about that.
mm.
With because now I'm calling them into something higher, and as a senior leader, I've already established what the culture is going to ultimately be.
That part.
So now I don't have to invent the culture because this person has caused the problem, and now the conflict feels personal. Oh, you trying to come at me
Mm,
because
mm,
that's one of the things that excellent, talented people do that are divas
mm.
because they know they're good and they know how they are. But if I allow them to kind of do whatever, then I got to now manage all the damage
That part.
control that they're
That
doing. I got to
part.
contain all of that stuff.
Yep.
And what I'm explaining has come out doing it wrong,
Mm,
where I didn't set the stage, I didn't set the culture, I didn't set the standard.
mm.
So now I have an inner standard, but I've not articulated that standard openly and outwardly. And so now it does feel personal. Now it feels like I'm coming at you because I don't either like you or whatever, because I got it wrong. So the first step is I set the tone early. This is the framework. Now this talented person who's doing their thing, now this is what we do.
Mm,
I want to are we cool with that? Well, I got to think about it. That's fine. But ultimately, I'm going to need you to be in alignment with the organizational vision and mission. Now, if you're not in alignment with the organizational vision and mission, then you know what, as talented and as amazing and extraordinary as you are, this might not be the best fit for you.
That part.
Because the gain that you get with the talent is mitigated by the loss of momentum and organizational culture and people, like you said, coming later, doing whatever. I don't want to engage with this person.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in a negative, even though it feels like a positive.
Yeah.
Because if you're not going to ultimately be a team player, I'm not asking you to coach everybody up. What I'm asking you is to be in alignment with the vision and mission. Some leaders are excellent and amazing, and they do that stuff. They will set it up. They'll help bring people in. We'll help do. Not everybody's going to do that, and that's okay. I need you to be at your best, handle your responsibility in your lane, but you can't do it at the expense of other people's lanes.
That part.
And if that's what's happening, now you're more of a liability than an asset as we're moving forward, as a company, as a group, as a production, et cetera, et cetera. And so accountability is a word that you used earlier, and confrontation is a part of accountability upon occasion.
Right.
And so we as leaders cannot be afraid to confront. We have to be willing to do it. But if you set the table,
that part,
and you go into it properly, there's a thing that I talk about is the hug model of confrontation: humility, understanding, and grace.
Woo!
I'm going to come and I'm going to decenter myself. Humility is decentering myself. I'm making room. Understanding is, listen, I don't see everything. Give me your perspective. Grace is, okay, you know what? I understand where you're coming from. This is not what where we probably need to be. That's not the standard. But you know what? I'm going to show grace in this instance. If you're willing to try your best and work with me and work with us to be better. And so if we come into confrontation with those three components after we've already set the culture, then that diva doesn't have as much power.
Yes.
Because what happens is that person will have power over me, because it's like, you know what, they the best singer, man. I don't want to lose my thing. You see what they can do. They're the best dancer. They're the best salesperson. They're the best communicator. They're the best presenter. So, and they know this because, the people that are good know that they're good.
Yeah.
And one of the things is like, okay, you're going to use your good for good, or you're going to use your good for bad.
Yeah.
And if you're going to use your good as it is for bad, you know what? It's not good for me.
Get to step in. Step in.
Yeah.
Well, and you brought up a couple of sensitive topics that I'd love to, maybe dive into a little bit more, particularly through this lens of like setting a culture of, diversity, equity, inclusive voices. And, one thing that I have found, and then also you described confrontation, and this is where, I have learned with time, and that's why I really appreciate the hug model, but confrontation is not necessarily a bad thing, but what is our culture of confrontation? How do we, hey, go to your teammate and say like, hey, I see something good in you. If you maybe could work on these one or two things, or holding someone accountable in the form of, well, listen, man, that decision or that choice that you made, perhaps has impacted the team in some negative ways. And we would like for you to maybe, correct it so that we can all be better as a team or as an organization. And, some of that then is also being mindful of, because you've got the divas, but then what I always love finding are those quiet giants, brother, that don't really know how great that they are. And, like you put them in the right circumstance or whatever, and they just are able to like lift mountains, and they didn't know how strong they are, which is, an alternate. And that's part of the senior leadership that you got done describing. And this is something that I've had to learn as a leader. It's less about me doing the things and, again, maintaining the vision and empowering teammates based off of my unique understanding of who they are, what they're good at, what they're not so good at, and how, all of us together, create this body that is then responsible for getting somewhere. But, just taking a little bit of a step back, again,
Mhm.
as we're mindful of like diversity, equity, and inclusion, how it's kind of being attacked right now, you know, um,
Mhm.
what is your thinking and or strategy and tips for an organization that's maybe a little bit more mature and needs to
Mhm.
update its mission, its vision, its core values, right? Based off of a time and a place that we're not
Mhm.
really in anymore. What is that process like? And how do you get people to maybe say, hey, the way that we were doing it back in the day, yeah, that got us here, right? But we
Mhm.
maybe need to update our way
Mhm.
of thinking in order to be able to participate in now better and in the future.
I think it's important. There's four questions. Okay, so everything you talk about, we want to update. We need to do those things. So I think we all need to get together. And the first question we need to ask as an organization is, what is our future story?
Mm,
So our future story is, where do we want to be and who do we want to be? So where and who? Okay. So we want to be here. We want to be doing this. And this is what it looks like. And so what is our future story? Is it going to be 10 years? Is it going to be 20 years? Is it going to be 50 years? What's it going to be? 5 years, 3 years, 6 months, whatever. What's our future story?
mm,
So we need to be able to paint that picture in a vivid way to say, you know what, this is what our organization is going to look like. This is what's going to feel like. This is what we're going to be ultimately doing. Um, so that's the first thing. So let's have a big future story lens or picture. Boom. Okay. So now the next question is, what is our origin story? And so the origin story is important because it's the catalyst on why we exist. You know, so there's no Spider-Man without a radioactive spider. You know, there's no Iron Man without him being caught in the cave and doing whatever.
yeah, yeah,
There's no, so we go through all the heroes. They all had an origin story.
right.
And the reason why it's important for us to juxtapose our origin story with our future story is because it gives us the spark in which is why we exist.
Mm,
And so we don't want to be trapped by our past, but we do want to understand our past, the good and the bad of it,
mm,
you
mm,
know? And so the next question is, what is our present story? It's kind of it aligns itself with the three P's that you talked about. So now I've talked about, we painted a picture of what our future story is like. We were organizational anthropologists, and we look back at what our origin story is.
mm,
We took a snapshot on what our present story is, and then the fourth thing is, what is our why story? And our why story isn't why we came to be. Our why story is, what is our why right now?
mm, mm,
And so now it feels like, okay, we're going somewhere because we started with the somewhere, and now we're building off of a potential future versus our story past.
mm, mm,
And so, you brought up the fact that there's organizations that feel caught in the past. It's because they don't talk about the future. They don't talk about the future story, and we try to protect our past. Why? Because our past is comfortable for us, you
mm.
know. And it's like, I was at the gym literally yesterday, and uh, I'm not as young as I used to be, but I still got some swag. I'm still doing what I'm doing. And so I was talking to some people on the weekend about playing pickup basketball again, or maybe get into a league. So after I finished my workout, stair climber, lift, did like a 30-minute, session of stretching and jumping and all this different stuff. I was like, let me get some shots up.
Right.
And so get some shots up. I'm shooting. I'm like, okay, my goal is to have 100 makes, jump shots. So these young boys come over and they say, hey, you want to play with us? So I'm like, I haven't played in a game for like, 8 months or whatever,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah, yeah.
longer. Okay. I'm like grown, doing grown people things. I'm not, in the gym all the time playing
Yeah.
hoops. I was like, I'll play. So I played. I didn't embarrass myself,
There you
you
go.
know. I did not embarrass myself. See, that's the goal when you get to a certain level. Look, I'm not trying to dominate. I'm just trying not to be
You feel
embarrassed,
me?
man.
You feel
You
me?
know what I mean? So, didn't embarrass myself. I had some plays, play some D, hit some shots, or whatever, whatever. And the game ended. They're like, "You want to run it back?" I was like, "Nah, I'm done." Now I'm out. I mean, I'm gonna take my W and I'm going
Yeah,
home.
you feel me?
You know what I mean? I was like, I'm out. You know what I mean? I didn't even tie my shoes up. I was like,
Yeah.
I threw my shoes
Yeah.
up. I'm walking out. I'm just getting in the car anyway.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
But the reason why I say that is because it's easy for us, and we've seen, the old heads talk about what they used to
Mm,
be. You know
mm,
what I mean?
mm.
And I'm gonna talk about what I used to be. Let me talk about whatever, whatever. It's like, no, no, I understand what you used to be, but this is what we're doing right now.
That part.
And so part
What's
of me being in tune with my present day is like, listen, I don't have a second game in me. I'm going home. Younger version of me is like, nah, we going again. We going again. And then I would have went home. I might not have been available for this, man. I
Yeah.
might have been, like an ox in, an iron lung, man. I'm like, told you, I'm, I'm gonna been in the ER, man. Hey, man,
Oh
I
my
can't, I
gosh.
can't come, man, because I was playing hoop. I did 2 games, man. I had 1 game in me, but I did two because I'm trapped in what I used to be, man.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, in order for me to do these things in the present day, this is what it requires from me right now. I know,
Oh my
I
gosh,
know, man. I don't
bro.
even know what that.
Hey, homie, but you know what though, bro? And like just so well said. And oh man, dang, that was such a great analogy, bro. For real, for real. And I've written about this before as well. And this is actually a writing technique, and again, this is the second time I've talked about this today, in that, you know, I've talked about delusional dreaming, you know, and it's so important to have that aspirational language, like of who you aspire to be, who you want to be, right? But to your whole point, like you also then have to like face facts and be mindful of the reality of a situation, and so some of that I've realized in storytelling, there is a balance, right? Where you need to have, and this is where it's like there's abstract and concrete, and then also like qualitative and quantitative, right? You can describe the qualities of the organ. Yeah, we want to be really rich and we want to do this and we want to do that, right? But is it Jay-Z, or was it, I think I heard it might have even been Boosie that said, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. You know what I'm saying? And you can have like the real aspirational language, like, and this is in the form of organizational goal, for example. Oh, yeah, we want to do $1 million in revenue this year based off of our mission, vision, and values. It's like, well, how much revenue did you do last year? 15,000. Well, okay, like it's cool to have that aspirational language, right? But do you have the concrete, that quantifiable
Mhm,
language that is going to provide you the path in order to help to bridge that gap between where you currently
mhm,
are and where you want to be, and then also mindful of your history, right? Because you can say how great you are back in the day, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, is the data telling you that? You know what I mean? Or
mhm,
do you need to get more creative or figure out a way, you
mhm,
know what I mean, to be a little bit more rooted in reality? And not to say that being delusional is completely bad, right? Because at the same time, if you're only living in the reality of the situation, you know what I'm saying?
mhm,
Like, you maybe aren't pushing yourself hard enough. You might not be creating those goals that
mhm,
are stretching you and challenging you and
mhm,
requiring you to be the best version of yourself today. You know what I'm saying? And you have to
mhm,
have, in my opinion, that healthy balance of being delusional and then
mhm,
checking in with reality and going back and forth with
mhm,
the two.
mhm. Yeah, man, the tension between the data and the delusion. And so the question is, I can't be delusional without a bridge from the data. It's like, okay, you know what? I can have this delusional dream. I can have this, this beautiful future. Hey man, we need to have that.
Mm,
Because hope again is the thing that presses us forward and
that was the
gives us the
word.
ability to press through the challenges of change requires.
Yep.
Okay, that's what hope is. All right. But if I don't have a bridge to hope, I don't have a bridge to the dream, I don't have a bridge to the thing, then it just feels like I'm just kind of doing whatever.
That part.
There's no momentum in that. So how do I get from okay, um, here to there? Let's be practical. Okay, in order for me to be able to play with these young boys, I need to get to the gym this many times a week. Okay, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do that. When I was, 1922, bro, I play all day with no prep. It doesn't matter, okay? And I would laugh at dudes like me. You know, I would literally laugh at me, bro. I would talk about dudes like me. I would.
Yeah, yeah.
But in order for me to operate in the present and in the future at the level that I want, I got to be real about where I'm at. I can't play like a 1922-year-old when I'm not 1922.
That part.
Okay. I got kids, man, that are like doing stuff. All right.
Right.
That are real living people with jobs.
Mm.
So when you got real living people with jobs, you got to do something different. And so how do I still maintain excellence at a more mature place? How do I do that organizationally in the present? I can have the foundation of our storied past, but that storied past is not going to help us in the changing present. So what do we do about this delusional dream? What do we move from the data and the details to be able to connect and build a bridge from here to there?
Man, yeah, that's well said, brother. So and I know we only got about 10 more minutes, and I want to respect time here, so I'm going to push us along a little bit.
Yep.
You know, my question for you, my next question at least, is what common blind spots have you observed from leaders when trying to do the right thing, quote unquote, around equity, inclusion, and personifying, you know, that future state, that organization that they're trying to build?
So first of all, I think that unfortunately there has been this narrative that says that diversity and inclusion is something that it subtracts.
Mm,
And the reality is diversity and inclusion adds.
that
It
part.
doesn't take away, it adds to us, it doesn't take from us. And it's trying to circumvent subtraction with intentional addition and multiplication.
Mm.
And so one of the ways, some of the blind spots is understanding that I'm a part of the problem as much as I'm a part of the solution.
Woo!
And so we all have areas that we have limited awareness. There's all areas of our life where we have blind spots and things that we can't see. And the way that we shrink those blind spots is acknowledgement of that they exist. And so one of the things that I talk about in my book, and one of the shaping principles of our organization, Culture Creative, is that we all have cultural bandwidth. And cultural bandwidth is our ability to navigate difference. Cultural bandwidth can be, on a personal level, our culinary experience. What is my palate like? So for some people, their cultural bandwidth is, you talk to kids, it's nuggets, it's burgers, it's fries. That's my bandwidth. Okay.
Right, right.
So in order for them to get to a point where, okay, I might put a taco in there. We might be able to go get some seafood. We might be able to, do. So now I'm expanding your bandwidth through experience. And so as a leader, I have to recognize that my bandwidth is only what my bandwidth is. And bandwidth expansion happens not just what I know, but it's how I live. So there's a rubric that we use. It's learning, living, leading, legacy. I learn new information. I live that information. When I live that information, I can lead from that information at a higher level. When I lead at a high level, then I leave a different legacy. And so the blind spot is I see everything. My blind spot is I don't need anybody. The reality is, and this is another thing that I talk about in the book, but all of us have something. None of us have everything. When we put all of our somethings together, we have everything. We're more beautiful together. And so as an organization, we can build a beautiful community, beautiful organization when we recognize that I'm a piece of the mosaic, but I'm not the totality of the mosaic, because the sheer definition of a mosaic is many pieces. It's art in community, and that is where the power comes from. So what are the blind spots? Recognize or the belief that this is a subtraction conversation rather than addition, multiplication, exponential conversation. Because like you said earlier, organizations that employ, have diverse thought, experiences, backgrounds, realities, they elevate. That's what they do. All the statistics and data tells us this.
Mm.
You look at nations that do this very same thing. It elevates. It doesn't. It adds to. It multiplies. It becomes exponential. It doesn't bring it down. So a blind spot is, I think, it's a subtraction conversation rather than addition, multiplication, exponential conversation. Another blind spot is, hey, yo, I see it. No, no, no. You see something. You don't see everything.
Man.
And that is true of all of us.
Yes.
And when I acknowledge the fact that I don't have it, I don't got it, then I can get it. I had an argument with one of my daughters. We watched a movie together. And it was a movie with Jennifer Lopez, and it was around uh, uh, dancers. It was Hustlers.
Okay.
So
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
was mad at Hustlers. Okay, so we watched the movie. We're driving, and she starts talking about the movie, and I talked about how I didn't like it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of arguing her. I'm making a case for men. Okay, so we're having this conversation about men, women, blah blah blah. So I'm kind of making my case, right?
Right, right.
So I'm making a good case.
Yeah.
I'm making a good case. So then she says to me, she says, Dad, she says, never in your life have you walked down the street and thought, hey, somebody may grab me. You've never gone to your car and thought, if it's at night and it's an empty parking lot, is there somebody in the back seat? Is somebody going to do whatever? She starts telling me all these scenarios about the
Right.
experience of being a young woman in the world that I had never had.
That part.
So I made an assumption about an experience that I never had, and I thought I was an
Woo!
expert. The reality is I wasn't an expert, and I had to say, baby, you got it. You right. Daddy. And so what happened was it allowed us to connect on a deeper level as I acknowledged the fact from a vulnerable position that I didn't see it
Mm.
and that I was blind. And I was actually articulating my blindness and my ignorance because of my assumptions. And so all of us have those things. And that's why we need community and we need other people to help us in the areas that we don't see, hear, know, experience, and are ignorant and not aware. And so that must happen.
Yeah.
If it doesn't happen, our organization would not have the opportunity to be everything that it can be.
Bro, oh man. And just you're hitting so many bars right now, bro. I mean, I was having this conversation earlier today about because there's individual capacity, and when you are stretched at your limits, that then for all intents and purposes increases your capabilities in so many different ways, right? And I think to your whole point, particularly like through this team dynamic and recognizing like team capacity and inputs and outputs, if you're able to hold someone else's truth for so many different ways, like that increases, in my opinion, the ability for your team to be more capable. And what you just got doing is like closing the loop in the form of like communicating, like, because you were defending your position, you just showed like healthy confrontation and having a conversation. But then as a leader, brother, and a lot of leaders, I don't know why they don't know how to do this, but like going to someone that's following you, because really what I've recognized is people choosing and being willing and able to follow you, that is the real honor. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? Like being someone that someone says, "Hey, I want to follow you," because it's a choice, right? And a lot of leaders, they love the power and the control that comes with being in a leadership position. Whereas if you are humble and you accept, like with humility, this mantle to lead, and you are setting the tone, setting the direction, and then also allowing the people that are influencing you to make you a better leader in so many different ways by saying, hey, you know what, I have heard you out and I was wrong. I am
Mm-hmm.
changing my opinion based
Mm-hmm.
off of your ability and willingness to go to battle with me and to still recognize that we're on the same team. Well, that makes people trust you, love you, know you, like you even more, and want to continue to follow you. But we
Mm-hmm.
only get frustrated with those leaders where they're not hearing us. You know what I'm saying? Like, where it's just all like, you're just leading us in a direction that is not inclusive of the body, you know, because even a leader is a part of the body. The head of the organization is still, why is the head better than the hands or the leg or the knee? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's still one body. You feel me?
Absolutely, because organizational influence often blocks a leader from the opportunity to have the insight of being on the front line. So where you start, if I'm in a department, you know, a warehousing company. So if I'm the president of that thing, then I'm not out there grabbing, you know, I'm not out there with a forklift. I'm not out there grabbing boxes. I'm not out there in the machine shop. I'm not doing any of that stuff. So it would be very arrogant of me to be able to tell the person who's driving the forklift what that person should do if I'm not in the forklift or I've never driven one. But the reason why we don't do that well, Terrence, is because it's rooted in security or the lack thereof.
Yep.
So my ability to be vulnerable is directly connected to my ability to be secure within myself.
That part.
And so a secure leader has no problem being vulnerable. A secure leader has no problem. They can be right when they're wrong. So I'm wrong, but I'm going to handle my wrong rightly.
That part.
I'm not going to pretend that I'm right when I know I'm wrong, you know I'm wrong, but I'm going to pretend that I'm right.
That part.
So what that does is that invalidates our trust. It invalidates our synergy, our momentum, and all of those things, because in my wrong, I can't get right. Ooh. And if I am a secure leader, I can be vulnerable and say, I don't know. I'm sorry. I'll do better next time. Will you forgive me? Will you give me another chance?
Yeah.
You know, if you're able to say those sentences and follow through on the commitment of those sentences, reveal, man, the people that you lead, they're going to have your back. They're going to run through a wall for you.
That part.
Because you're not too big to be small in their presence. And everybody, all of us respect people that will do that.
Oh man, Julian, this is man, I only got through like half of the questions that I have for you, man. You just hit us with just so much wonderful information, and I want to respect the time. And then also, I think that you and I are going to run it back for a different community at a later point. So let's go ahead and maybe just save some of these nuggets. Yep. But for the Black Cactus audience, what is the best way for people to learn about you, to know about you, to get in touch with you, all that sort of good stuff, brother?
Yeah, I'm on all the socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. You can reach me at juliansnewman.com. I have a book called Beautiful Together that's on Amazon. You can go to beautifultogetherbook.com, and it's about building beautiful community. A lot of the things that we talked about today. And I think it's important for us, man, to have meaningful conversation like the one we're having here. And so for all of you in the Black Cactus community, I would love to connect with you and we can continue the conversation. And I'm excited to be able to do that. And I'm very grateful that that you allow me to be, you know, here with you and with your group. I'm very grateful.
That part, brother. Well, and so I just I sent you, and I'll email it over to you, a link to the Black Cactus Facebook group. And I would encourage you to join. And if anyone, if you're watching the replay, you know, tap in with Julian. This brother is a expert in his field. If you're, you know, building out your mission vision statement or revisiting it, or you're working on your culture, your internal culture as an organization, and how that relates to maybe like your organizational chart or your standard operating procedures, or if you just maybe want to talk about his book. Black Cactus actually has a version of his book in our library, so if you're interested in checking that out before, you know, reaching out to Julian, please feel free to ping me, and I don't mind loaning it to you. It's at our office right now. Julian was gracious and sent us a version of his book. So yeah, man, definitely appreciate you so much, brother. And thank you for the time. And we'll be in touch, all right?
All right, man.
All right, Jay. We'll catch you soon.
All right. Peace.
Peace.